They dragged her in with a broken rope around her neck. Not a woman, not a girl. A wild thing barefoot, bruised, hair snarled like tumbleweed after a storm. She stood barefoot in the dust of High Mercy, a town with no mercy at all, and spat blood into the sun. Too wild for any man, they said. Someone else added. She bit the sheriff clean through the glove. Laughter, but not the warm kind. The kind that hides fear. The auction platform creaked beneath her weight. She didn't cower, didn't flinch. Her eyes were the color of lightning striking dry earth, unblinking, furious, alive. The townsfolk stared like they'd stumbled upon a caged coyote foaming at the mouth. No one stepped forward and no one moved. She snarled and slammed her foot down hard enough to make the platform groan. That's when they fastened it to her. A broken bridle, half leather, half rusted iron, hung from her neck like a noose made for beasts. Not horses, beasts. The cracked leather dangled to her ribs, swinging in rhythm with her heaving breath. That bridle then became the symbol of her shame, of their fear, and eventually of her resurrection. A man coughed. Someone muttered, "She's been whipped," still wouldn't talk. The auctioneer lifted a tin bell and struck it once. The hollow clang echoed off the sandstone walls like a church bell at a funeral. Lot 17, he barked. One female, unbroken, age unknown, bad attitude, no known family, tends to bite. No refunds. People chuckled, but no one raised a hand. She grinned, teeth red. And then, she did something no one expected. She sat, right there on the platform, knees tucked, arms around her legs like she owned the place, like she was choosing exile over obedience. A woman in the crowd gasped. "She's mocking us." The auctioneer growled, "Get up." She didn't. He moved to strike her. But she stood slowly, like a storm rising from still air, and stared straight into his face. He hesitated. His hand fell. Her eyes said, "Do it. I dare you." No one had ever looked at him like that. Behind her, the bridle caught the wind and slapped her back. The cracked leather snapped like a whip against her spine, and her expression didn't change. Then out of nowhere he raised his hand. The rancher. Old leather hat, dust-covered boots, eyes that had seen more graves than weddings. He wasn't rich, wasn't clean, but he was standing. All heads turned. Hell. "Matthew," someone whispered. "You ain't even got a horse that'll carry you into town." He didn't answer. The auctioneer blinked. "You want her?" Matthew said nothing. Instead, he walked forward, pulled a silver coin from his coat, one with a dent through the center, and laid it gently on the table. "Not enough," the auctioneer snapped. Matthew added 2 bullets. The crowd laughed, but not all of them, because that meant something here. 2 bullets could end 2 problems. The auctioneer grunted. "Fine, take her." Someone jeered. "You buyin' trouble." "Cowboy," another voice muttered. "That girl ain't meant to be ridden with. She'll slit your throat come morning." But Matthew didn't hear them. He stepped onto the platform, walked slowly, like approaching a skittish stallion. She didn't move. He didn't reach for her. Instead, he knelt slowly and cut the rope around her wrists with a rusted knife. She flinched, not at the blade, but at the gesture. He set the broken bridle in her hands. One didn't throw it away, one didn't tell her to keep it, just gave her the choice. Then, he stepped down, turned his back, and began to walk. She could have run, could have stayed. Instead, she followed. Silently. Boots crunched, dust rose. The townsfolk parted. Some spat, some stared, but no one dared stop her. As they passed the saloon, a boy laughed and shouted, "There goes the lightning bolt, it stuck." She didn't blink, didn't smile, just walked. The bridle still swung from her hand, the cracked leather grazing the dirt, and Matthew never once looked back. The desert wind followed them like a ghost. She didn't speak, neither did he. For miles, they moved through the kind of silence that made most men twitch, the kind that carried voices from long ago. Every crunch of hoof on gravel, every creak of the saddle, was louder than breath, and still, he never looked back. Matthew rode ahead, but not far. Just enough to show trust, or foolishness. She walked behind his horse, untethered, unchained. Her boots were too big, borrowed from some corner of the town's storage shed, and her feet bled at the heels. Still, she walked like a soldier returning from a war no one believed in. The bridle dragged behind her, trailing in the sand like a wounded snake. She didn't throw it away. Not yet. They reached his land by dusk. The ranch was a quiet scar on the earth. 3 dead trees, 1 half-burnt barn, and a cabin that leaned like it wanted to fall but hadn't made up its mind. A single horse nickered in the pen, old, 1 eye clouded like milk, the kind of horse most men would have put down. She stared at it, and it stared back. Matthew dismounted without a word, tossed her a canteen. She caught it, sniffed it, drank like someone who hadn't had clean water in days. When she finished, he offered jerky. She took it, but didn't eat. Instead, she looked at the house, then at him. "You live alone." Her voice was rough as unsharpened gravel. First words she'd spoken. He nodded. "Mostly." She raised an eyebrow. "That horse don't count as company." "No," he said. "But it listens better than most." She snorted, almost amused. "Almost." He pointed toward the barn. "There's hay in there, blankets too. Sleep where you want, and that was it. No rules, no commands, no cage." She didn't say thank you, just walked toward the barn, dragging the bridle behind her. Inside, she found a corner dry enough to matter, tossed the bridle aside, but not far. Not yet. That night, she didn't sleep. She watched the sky through a crack in the roof, eyes wide open. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The horse snorted in its sleep. And in the cabin, the old man's fire cracked once, twice, then fell to embers. At dawn, she crept to the house, peered through the window. He was sitting at the table, staring at nothing, a tin cup in one hand, the other resting on a photograph. She couldn't see who was in it. She backed away. He opened the door. Coffee. She froze, nodded once. They sat on opposite ends of the porch. No words, just sips. Then she asked, "Why'd you take me?" He shrugged. "Didn't feel right. Them putting a price on you like that." She studied him. "You think I'm wild. I think you've been around too many men who needed taming more than you did." That silence again. She looked at the bridle still looped in her hand. "You ever break a horse that couldn't be broken?" Matthew leaned back in his chair. "Once." She waited. It drowned, ran straight into a river during a lightning storm, like it was trying to outrun the sky. She didn't laugh. Instead, she said, "Maybe it was trying to go home." He looked at her, and for the first time he saw her. Not the blood, not the spit, not the defiance, but something else. A girl who'd run too far from anything that once felt like home. Later that day, she fed his horse without being asked, laid her palm on its neck. It flinched. She didn't pull back. Matthew watched from a distance, said nothing. But that night, he left a pair of clean socks on the barn rail. A small gesture. Quiet. Unspoken. She didn't say thank you, but she wore them. On the 3rd morning, she emerged from the barn with the bridle over her shoulder, not dragging it anymore, just holding it. He was fixing a fence post, sleeves rolled, sweat painting dark trails down his back. She asked, "You got a name for your ranch?" He wiped his brow. "Used to. My wife called it Sparrow Creek." Why, he nodded toward the dry creek bed. "Birds used to come here in spring." Called. She looked at the cracked earth. Not a single bird in sight. "I don't see no sparrows." He stared into the distance. Not many reasons left for them to return. She was quiet. Then she walked to the post next to him, picked up a hammer, and drove the next nail in. Not for him. Not for gratitude, but because sometimes you fix what's broken not to rebuild but to prove it still matters. She didn't take to the house, not at first. She stayed in the barn, curled near the blind side of the old horse, kept the bridle close, coiled like a snake beside her bedroll of burlap and hay. Sometimes she talked to it in whispers, like it was listening. Sometimes she stared at it like it owed her something. Matthew didn't press. He left food on the porch in the mornings, water in a clean tin bowl, never forced a word from her. That's how she started to trust him, by the things he didn't do. The third week, she approached the house mid-afternoon, face streaked with dirt, clothes stiff with dried sweat. Her eyes didn't ask, but her shoulders did. The weight of filth, of carrying days she never chose to live. Matthew didn't speak. He just stepped aside, walked to the side of the house, and started a fire under the iron water barrel. She followed. He brought out a rusted basin clean enough, a bar of soap wrapped in oilcloth, a shirt that once belonged to someone smaller, softer. She didn't thank him, but when he turned to leave, she said, "Don't look." He stopped, nodded, walked away. She stood alone in the open air, steam rising from the barrel like breath. She dipped her hands in, first winced, then her arms, her neck. The water turned brown. She scrubbed like she was erasing herself. Every inch, every mark. She found old bruises that had forgotten how to hurt. By the time she was done, the sun had dropped low, and her shadow looked longer, calmer, like it belonged to someone else. The shirt hung on her like memory, too loose, too honest, but she wore it. That evening, she sat on the porch rail, still damp, knees drawn to her chest. Matthew was carving something, small, careful strokes into a block of cedar. She watched for a while before asking, "What is it?" He didn't look up. "Don't know yet. Sometimes I just start cutting." She thought about that. "How'd your wife die?" The knife paused. He set the carving down. "Fire. Stove caught while I was fixing fence. By the time I got back, there wasn't anything left to save." She looked at the cabin, then at the stove, barely glowing through the window. "I don't like fire either." He nodded. That was enough. She picked up the carving. It looked like a bird in mid-flight. "Not yet finished. I've never flown," she said, almost to herself. Matthew replied, "Takes time and space." That night, she didn't go back to the barn. She slept on the floor just inside the doorway, wrapped in a blanket facing the door, like a watchdog. Or maybe a prisoner still unsure whether the cell was open. The next morning he stepped over her quietly, poured 2 cups of coffee, set one beside her. She sat up, sipped it, made a face. "Tastes like old wood." He half smiled. That's the charm. She didn't laugh, but she sipped again. That day, they worked side by side on mending wire, feeding animal, tending soil that hadn't bloomed in seasons. He didn't correct her when she worked slow. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it came in pieces. "Ma died birthing me. Pa sold me when I was 12. The man who bought me liked to sing hymns while he hit." Each line dropped like stone into water. No splash, just depth. He never asked for more. That night, they ate rabbit stew in silence. She reached for bread. He passed it before she could ask. She froze. It was the first time someone had read her need before she voiced it. Later, he handed her a small box inside a hairbrush, used, worn, but clean. Her fingers hovered over it like it might burn her. "You can throw it out," he said. She didn't. She took it to the corner, sat by the hearth, and began to brush slow. Deliberate strokes. Hair like dead grass became something softer, tamed, but not broken. He watched without staring, just long enough to see her hand tremble slightly. She paused, then kept brushing. That night, she didn't sleep at the door. She moved to the spare bed, still wrapped in her own blanket, but off the floor. In the morning, she left the bridle on the porch rail, didn't take it with her and didn't say why. But it swayed in the wind like a flag lowered, not surrendered. Just rested. Matthew saw it, said nothing. But when she wasn't looking, He took the cracked piece of leather and nailed it gently to the barn wall next to a worn horseshoe, not as a threat, as a memory, a mark of what had passed. By week's end, the girl was brushing the old horse, feeding chickens, boiling water without burning herself. Her silence no longer felt like armor. It felt like breath. Something was changing. Not all at once, but enough to matter. It was the wind that woke her. Not the kind that howls, but the kind that creeps, slips through the cracks like old secrets. It whispered across her face just before dawn, tugging strands of hair and dreams alike. When she sat up, the house was quiet, Matthew's door still shut, the fire cold. She didn't reach for a blanket. She reached for the bridle, except it wasn't there. The porch rail was empty. She stood, stepped barefoot into the chill. Breath fogged in front of her face as she followed instinct, not path. Out the door, past the well, toward the barn. That's where she found it. Nailed to the inside wall, just above a shelf of rusted tools and tangled rope, hung beside a single crooked horseshoe. It looked smaller now, less like a threat, more like something fossilized. For a long time, she just stood there. Then, her fingers touched the bridle, gently. Like it could still bite. Matthew's voice came from behind her, low and even. Didn't know what to do with it. Figured it didn't belong to me. She didn't turn, just asked. Whose was it? There was a long silence, then hers. She turned now. Hers. He nodded, stepping closer. The barn light caught half his face, the other stayed in shadow. She was a Mustang. Red coat, fire in her bones. I caught her when I was young enough to think I could tame anything. Took me 3 weeks just to get a rope on her. Another month before she stopped trying to kill me every time I saddled up. He chuckled, but it was hollow. She taught me more than any preacher or book. Showed me how some things ain't meant to carry burdens. Some things are only born to run. She looked back at the bridle. What happened? He sighed. One summer, storm rolled in quick and loud. She panicked, ran straight through the fence, didn't stop, never came back. He touched the leather strap. I found this near the river a week later, torn, still wet. Never did find her. She whispered. Maybe she found something better. He gave her a look. Maybe, he said. Then she asked, almost trembling, why'd you keep it, he thought, then shrugged. To remind me what I lost, and what not to try to hold too tight. She nodded, eyes misting over. They put one like that on me when I was 13, said it'd teach me respect. Matthew's mouth tightened, but he didn't interrupt. They didn't use it for riding, just control, like a dog. Her voice cracked, sometimes. They'd make me wear it when guests came over, like I was some prize. She laughed dry, bitter. I used to think if I just behaved, they'd take it off, but they liked it more when I fought. She sat down on the hay. I didn't cry the first time they hit me, or the second, but the third. They made my little sister watch. That's when I screamed. Matthew sat beside her. Not too close. She continued. I ain't seen her since. Don't know if she's dead or just better off not remembering me. Silence again. The barn held its breath. Then she looked at him. You ever lose something you didn't deserve? To his jaw worked. He nodded. Yeah, he said. I lost my wife before I could say I was sorry. For working too much. For not listening when she told me she was tired. Her voice softened. What was her name, Clara? She'd have hated me. He shook his head. No. She'd have fed you. Told you to wash your hands before dinner. Would have made you brush your hair every damn night. That made her smile. A real one. Small. Shy. But real, she whispered. I don't think anyone's ever talked to me like that before. Matthew said nothing, just handed her the carving from his pocket, the one he'd been shaping in silence. It was finished now. A bird with one wing tucked and the other open, mid-turn. Like it wasn't flying away but circling back. She held it in both hands. I think I want to stay, she whispered. Then stay, he replied. And not just sleep on the floor. No one asked you to. She stood brushing hay from her shirt, then paused, looked at the bridle once more. Finally, she took it down, held it for a long beat, then walked outside and hung it on the gate, not to forget, but to mark the line between before and now. Matthew followed. Neither spoke, but for the first time they watched the sun rise together, her with her hands empty, him with his heart just a little less so. It started with a rope, not the kind used to bind, but the kind used to build. She walked into the barn early one morning, caught Matthew brushing the old horse with quiet hands. He didn't expect her to speak, but she did. "I want to ride." He turned slowly. Been years since that horse carried two. She met his eyes. "Then I'll go alone." He didn't argue, just nodded. She saddled the horse herself. Not clumsy, not rushed, just sure, like the motion had always lived somewhere deep in her bones, waiting for daylight to pull it free. The horse shifted, uneasy, but she whispered something low, soothing, and he stilled. Matthew watched her mount. She moved like water swinging into the saddle as if gravity had nothing to argue with. No flinch, no fear, just motion. She didn't gallop, not at first. She rode to the edge of the field, looked back, then kicked once, and the world shifted. Dust flew like memory, her hair lashed like a flame. The horse took to the wind as if it had been waiting its whole life for this moment. Matthew stood still, one hand gripping the fence post, eyes wide, not with fear, with awe. She circled the pasture once, twice, then pulled up smooth, a smile spreading across her face like sunrise over cold hills. He'd never seen her smile like that, not with her lip, with her whole being. She slid off, breathless. "How'd I do?" He cleared his throat. "Horse is still standing. Must have been all right." She tossed him a look. "You want to ride?" He hesitated. "It's been a while." She stepped close, then start slow. They rode together that evening. She took the lead. He didn't mind. At first, the horse struggled. Two riders was a heavy truth, but then it settled, balanced. Like maybe, just maybe, it wasn't built to carry one life but two that had been broken differently. At the top of the ridge, they dismounted, watched the horizon burn orange and blue. She pulled something from her pocket, the small carving, the circling bird. She said, "I used to think I was the broken kind of wild." He looked at her. "I still do." He said, "But maybe not the kind that needs fixing." She nodded, turning the carving in her hand, then looked at the saddle. There was only one. Still. That night, they returned home in silence. The next day, Matthew rode into town. When he came back, he carried a wrapped parcel, old leather, worn but well kept. She opened it slowly. A second saddle. Not new, but strong. Built for miles. He didn't say anything, just leaned it against the fence and walked into the barn. She followed, laid her hand on his back. He flinched, just barely, then leaned into it. She whispered, "No one's ever made space for me before. Not without taking something in return." Matthew turned. "I'm not asking for anything." She stepped back. "I know." The next morning, there were two saddles on the rail, two horses in the pen. He'd traded for another blind in one eye, lean, but steady. She named him Second Chance. They rode that day with the wind behind them. Didn't speak, didn't need to. Because sometimes love doesn't start with a kiss. Sometimes it starts with matching strides. At sunset, they rode back into the yard. She dismounted first, reached for his hand to steady him. He let her, and in that touch, something shifted again, not loud, not sudden, just real. That night, she sat beside him on the porch, legs stretched out, shoulders close. He passed her the cup without looking. She took a sip, smiled. Still tastes like old wood. He laughed, really laughed for the first time in years, and she laughed with him. The moon climbed slow, lazy over the barn. A pair of boots rested at the door, hers now, not borrowed. The bridle still hung on the gate, not a warning, but a memory, a sign that no one lives untouched, but some still find ways to be free. The fire came in the form of men, 3 riders, dust-dark hats, spurs too polished. They didn't smile when they rode in, didn't knock, just dismounted slow like men who had returned to claim what was theirs. She saw them first from the porch, the way her face drained not from fear, but from old knowing. Matthew noticed immediately. She stood, didn't move. One of them, a man with a scar like a river down his jaw, tipped his hat. "Didn't think you'd come this far west, girl." She didn't answer. Another one spat. "Boss said if we ever saw you again, bring you back. Said he paid good money. Called you a horse that wandered from its pen." Matthew stepped out. He didn't speak either. Not at first. He looked at her. Her fists were clenched, breathing shallow, but she didn't run. "You know them?" he asked quietly. She nodded once. "They owned me." The scarred man laughed. "We fed you, gave you a bed." She said nothing. Matthew stepped down from the porch. He didn't go for a gun. He didn't have to. Sometimes a man's silence is louder than a gunshot. "You need to leave," he said. The third man, youngest, twitchy, grinned. "And what'll you do if we don't?" Old man Matthew turned to her. "Go inside." "I'm not going," she said, firm. "I rode too far for that," Scarjaw sneered. "He thinks you're his woman now, cute. But that bridal says otherwise." He nodded toward the gate. There it was, still swinging in the wind. The cracked leather, the iron buckle, the ghost of her past. And suddenly she moved. Fast, past Matthew, past the men. She walked straight to the gate, ripped the bridle down with both hands, held it high. "This is mine," she said, "and no man touches me again." Then she threw it, hard. It landed in the dirt between them. The scarred man's grin faded. "Girl, don't forget who you belong to." She took a step forward. "I never did. That's why I left." Matthew moved beside her. He didn't reach for her. But she reached for him. Not his hand, his hat. She pulled it off, placed it on her own head, then said without blinking, "You come any closer, I'll show you just how wild I still am." Scarjaw's hand hovered over his hip. Matthew shook his head slowly. "Don't." The twitchy one moved first. Matthew caught him mid-step, shoulder-checking him into the dust. Scarjaw drew, but not fast enough. A warning shot rang out hers. She'd taken the old rifle from beside the door, leveled it, and fired into the air. The birds scattered. The wind picked up. "Try again," she whispered. "Barrel steady. See if you ride back with anything that still works." The men hesitated. Twitchy stood up, nose bleeding. "You're gonna regret this." Matthew stepped closer. "I already regret a lot of things. Let's not add your graves to the list." They backed off. No drama, no showdown. Just silence. Sometimes the loudest victories don't need bodies, just boundaries. When the dust settled, she lowered the rifle. Matthew looked at her. She handed it back, hands shaking now. He took it gently. "Why'd you throw the bridle?" he asked. Her voice cracked. "Because I finally knew it wasn't mine anymore." That night, they sat on the porch, side by side, the hat still on her head. He didn't take it back. Didn't need to. She said, "I used to dream of killing them. All of them." He nodded. "I used to dream of seeing Clara again, telling her I never stopped loving her." She looked down. "I didn't think I was built for love. Not the kind that stays and just the kind that hurts," he answered. "Sometimes love ain't gentle, but it's honest." Then he added, "When I saw you ride toward them today, I saw something else. What, not just fire, purpose." She smiled, barely. "I never wanted to be saved. I didn't want to save anyone," he said. "I just wanted peace." She leaned back. "Guess we got both." Inside the barn, the new horse snorted. The wind shifted, and for the first time in years, neither of them looked over their shoulders. It was spring by the time the fence line was mended. The frost had pulled back from the soil like an old dog surrendering to warmth. Birds returned slow at first, then in flocks stitching the sky with sound. The creek, once just a memory in the dirt, trickled again with meltwater from faraway hills, and with it, Something else flowed back into the ranch. Life. Real life. Not survival, not endurance. Something gentler. Matthew built a second saddle rack in the barn, equal height, equal space. No announcement. No ceremony. Just wood. Nails. And the quiet understanding that two lives now moved side by side. She found it one morning while feeding the horses. Stared at it like a miracle carved from oak. Then, slowly, she set her saddle on it, not tossed, not leaned, placed. The bridle never returned to its hook. They'd buried it in the field beyond the creek, wrapped in cloth. Beneath the roots of a sapling, with no cross, no name. Just closure. Some things didn't need to be remembered to be honored. Some things needed to rest. She changed over time, not in flash or speech, but in stillness. Her shoulders softened. Her laughter, rare and rusted, rang brighter. She stopped checking the door at night. Began sleeping with her boots off. Her hands open. He changed too. Less coffee, more sleep. The gun stayed unloaded now. One morning, they rode into town together. People stared, not for the reasons they used to. She wore her hat low, her boots clean, a red bandana tucked around her neck, not for fashion, but because it reminded her of something wild she chose to keep. They walked into the general store shoulder to shoulder. She spoke first. He carried the flour. When the clerk asked if she was the wild one, she replied without pause, "Not anymore." On Sundays, they sat on the porch. He carved. She read, eyes tracing old words like they were new. He offered to teach her letters. She declined. I like the mystery. At dusk, she often watched the hill's eyes on the edge of everything. "You still thinking about leaving?" he asked one evening. She shook her head. "Not anymore." "Why not?" "Because I'd be going alone. And I've already done enough of that." He reached for her hand. This time, she didn't flinch. They held it long after the sun went down. At the next town dance, folks expected them to stay on the porch like they always did. They didn't. She pulled him into the circle. Boots kicking dust, skirts brushing his jeans. They didn't glide, but they moved like people who had been through fire and still found rhythm, someone said. "They don't look like they belong together," another whispered. "They look like they've been through the same storm. Same difference. Back home, a new fence was going up, a real one. Taller, stronger. Not to keep danger out, but to keep something worth protecting in." She planted flowers along the walkway. Wild ones. The kind that don't obey garden rows. He bought her a dog. It was ugly, lopsided, loud. She loved it instantly. Sometimes. She still woke in the dark, breath short. But now he was there. And when he stirred with his old aches, she was the one who pulled the blanket higher. They didn't say "I love you." They didn't need to. Love had already been proven in a saddle built for two. In a porch with 2 cups. In the soft thud of boots that never walked away again. The old horse died that summer. They buried him near the sapling. She laid the last piece of the bridle on his grave, Matthew said. He ran far. She nodded, and free. They stood in silence, hands joined, watching the wind ripple the grass. The sapling bent gently. A bird landed on the lowest branch, sang once, then flew, and they watched it go, not with longing, but with peace, because they weren't chasing escape anymore. They were building home, together. Some people aren't broken, they were just never given space to breathe. In the rugged stillness of the West, where life is measured in fence posts and shadows, we forget that not all healing looks like medicine. Sometimes it looks like silence, like handing someone a cup of water instead of a cage, like building a second saddle rack just in case. This story wasn't about saving someone. It was about making space for someone to choose freedom. Many of us carry our own cracked bridles, memories of being told we were too wild, too damaged, too much. But maybe the truth is simpler. We were never meant to walk behind someone, only beside. Love isn't the absence of pain. It's what happens when someone stays anyway. Let this story be a reminder there's no shame in being wild, only in being caged by those who never saw your worth. And when someone finally does ride beside them, not behind, not ahead, just beside, always.